Hey guys, Garrett Tice here with Applied Software. Today I want to talk about a scenario that I've been seeing more and more, rather it be I'm on site doing a CAM training or I'm speaking with someone through the support department. So what I'm going to talk about today isn't directed at every CAMduct user, it's directed at the CAMduct users who have both a liner table and a plasma, and you're communicating to both of those pieces of hardware using CAMduct. Now, what I've seen here recently in the past few years is that a company invests in a software upgrade to their hardware, and they're doing it to the plasma as well as the water jet. Now, when that happens, 9 times out of 10, they're going to use the same file extension or the same file type. And so the question that I often get is, how do I know which file is for which table, right? And the reason that that's so key is when I'm nesting metal, I have a spacing between my nested developments, and some people have a distance from the edge of the sheet. Now, when you're doing liner, you can do a common line cut. You don't really want any distance between those pieces. So today I want to show you my suggested setup and the best practices to handle that specific scenario. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into File, Setup, Installed Machines, and talk about my tables. What I do for good practice is I create groups, and I put my plasma in a metal group, and I put my water jet in a liner group. You can move them at any times, and you can always create a new group or change the name of a group. Inside of the plasma, I'm going to jump into Setup, and I'm going to move to the Controller tab. On the Controller tab, you're able to declare a file extension. Now the D6 post-processor, the default extension is MP. You can change these. It's not an issue. You can type in what you want. When you load a post-processor, the base or default file extension will be placed inside of this box. So I've got CNC here for this example. I'm going to go to the setup of my water jet and move to the controller tab, and you can see that this is also CNC. I've got an item in the job here, just a transition that's lined. So you can see that I've got an insulation material as well as a metal material. I suggest using processes when you're nesting. It's so much faster than going into automatic nesting and then writing NC. With a click of a button, you can do both. Now, I've got a nest metal plus NC and a nest liner plus NC. The first thing I want to talk about is nest metal. So I'm going to go into my options here, and we're only going to focus on 3 tabs: general nesting, preferences, and method. Under general nesting, you have the ability to call out the spacing between the nested parts, as well as a distance from the edge of the sheet. So here I've got a 1/4 inch called out for both of those. Under preferences, I can call out what machine I want this process to nest for. And I want this to be for metal, so I've got my plasma called out. Because I only want to nest my metal here, under method, I have nest installation developments turned off, which means that this process is going to ignore and exclude all installation materials whenever it's going and doing its nest. Under write NC, I've got my machine called out that I want it to write NC for, and I do not have write NC for all machines in group checked. Now, granted, I only have one machine per group. In liner, I have my water jet, and in metal, I have my plasma. Some companies don't have groups set up and they have this checked, and they're wondering, why do I keep getting all of these cut files, all these different extensions? So if you have that checked and you've got multiple machines set up and they're all in one group, you'll see a cut file for each one of those machines. But because I've got one table and I know that I'm only wanting my metal, I don't have that enabled. I'm going to go ahead and hit process here. I don't need to save that job. Now, notice the time is 10:08. So for this example, I'm going to wait until 10:09 before I jump in and nest my liner. But I want to show you 9002 galvanized 18. If I give it a double click, you can see, okay, there is some spacing there. I'll give it a view NC so that way we can watch it cut. And I'm just worried about my distance here. You can see that I've got a slight distance. I go look at my cut file. It's 9002 and it was at 1008. Now 9002 is going to remain. That is my metal file. But what I want you to notice is I'm going to jump back into CAMduct, and now I'm going to run my nest liner. Before I run it, I'll show you what I have set up for nest liner. Again, only focusing on the general nesting, preferences, and method tabs. Under general nesting, I have no spacing between the edge or my parts. I want them to be as close together as they possibly can be. Under preferences, I've got my water jet called out, and under method, I am nesting insulation developments. I'll go ahead and show you the select machine here. I've got my water jet called out, and again, not writing NC for all machines in the group. Go ahead and hit process. Now this message, do you want to overwrite 9002? Okay. I want to show you and comment on this because my concern was, it changed my spacing, right? If I go look at 9002, notice that they were both updated at 1009 when I had originally created this at 1008. Inside of CAMduct, if I view NC on 9002 for my plasma, I'll run it through, and we'll look just to ensure that our spacing is still between our pieces. And you can see we do have spacing. Let's look at the liner file. We'll do a view NC for the water jet. Purple indicates a duplicate element, right? So therefore it is basically saying, hey, I'm cutting this line twice because they're snug together. Now, CAMduct does offer a common line cutting option, but it's not in your face. You have to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete 9003. And I'm going to run just my nest liner only. Now I'll show you what that is. It's the same exact thing as far as my nesting options, 0, calling out my water jet, and nesting insulation. But I am not going to write NC. I'll go ahead and hit process here. Now when I right click on this file, I have the option to go to write NC. Right? When I write NC, I've got this. It looks fine. I can go ahead and hit OK and it'll give me 9003. If I right click and select machine, I can call out my water jet and I can enable common line cutting. Now when I write NC, hit OK, I've got 9004, and you can see that it's technically common line cutting. The color being displayed is the duplicate element. Now if we actually watch this cut, we'll hit F5 and zoom this back in here. We'll watch it run through. So there's one cut, there's two cuts, right? The common line cutting, it's there, but as you can see, it went back over that same cut 2 times. The only way that I've found to enable that common line cutting is through the select machine option, but I have noticed that it still duplicates the elements. Now what I want to show you is I've got 2 cut files, 9002 and 9004. Now granted, you can have a label for your 9004 as well as all of your liner components, but I oftentimes see people just marking the liner with a Sharpie or something as opposed to trying to mess with getting a label to stick on that insulation. So if we're looking here, 9004 and 9002, which one's which? Okay. So what I've decided to do and what I found the easiest is if I delete 9004 and both of them, we'll just go through the process one more time, is in the setup of the installed machine of the water jet, I'll put a prefix of L so I know that that's a liner file. Go ahead and hit OK here, and I'll run back through that scenario. I'll do a nest metal in NC, and I'll do a nest liner in NC. So I've got 9005 is a metal file, 9006 is a liner file. I've got 9005, which is my metal file, and L9006 to indicate that that is a liner file. Another way that I've seen this handled is through the material limiting or restricting a machine. So if you go into your installation materials, you've got this machine option. Now, unfortunately, you can't mass edit these. You have to come into each thickness and call out the liner table. It's early setup, so right when you get the table, I would suggest go ahead and taking the time to restrict all of these liner tables to go to one specific machine. Now, in doing that, it you don't have to select machine. You don't necessarily have to call out a machine in preferences when you're nesting. It's saying, hey, this material can only go to this machine. That doesn't solve the difference in extension, and I strongly suggest that if you have a liner and a metal table and they're both using the same extension, to put a prefix on so that way you know which files are going which direction. And that way you don't pull up 9006 out at your plasma thinking, hey, oh, that's a cut file. But it turns out that there's no spacing and it's trying to do those common line cuts on your metal. You're going to have to scrap that sheet and start over again because it's not allocating for kerf at that point. It's going to cut over the top of one piece and you'll find that it's probably a little bit short. So that's how I suggest handling that. Give me some feedback below. Let me know if this was beneficial. And thank you.